We got quite a mess here in Venezuela for the economy, for its people, and now, of course, we've got politics as well. After listening to Stephen's report, what do you think is next for the country?
Well, I think the question is whether or not the opposition is going to pull through with this two-thirds majority, what's called a supermajority. What's clear is that we've got a disaster for Chavismo, and it's just not clear yet whether it's going to be an utter catastrophe, because if the opposition moves toward this two-third majority, which some people think is likely and even probable, then they will be able to do a whole series of things, including press for impeachment, call a revocatory referendum to withdraw Nicolas Maduro from office, even attempt to rewrite the constitution of the country. And under those circumstances, I think you will see something of a deadlock. You'll see the branches of government in a standoff and neither really able to move. And certainly no one will be able to have the autonomy to really take strong measures when it comes to correcting economic problems.
I can't help but think of the next follow-up question on this, which is if you're right, you've got this deadlock and Maduro doesn't want to step down, you got yourself a serious situation there, don't you?
Absolutely. And it's not so much a question of Maduro not wanting to step down as it is the fact that these are constitutionally, existing powers that, for example, the president has to dissolve the assembly. The assembly has to essentially stack the Supreme Court. They would call it stacking if the Chavistas did it, but they'll most certainly try to change the content of the Supreme Court and use that Supreme Court as a way, as they have said, to remove Nicolas Maduro from office. And what we can expect in the short term is a call for a referendum on Nicolas Maduro's leadership. Now, under those circumstances, there will be a possibility for a new election with new leadership, and that will create the possibility for some kind of exit. But again, you've got this underlying economic difficulty that Chavismo has had a serious problem confronting the economic crisis. And now that the powers of the state are divided, it seems even more difficult to picture a way in which that crisis can be resolved.
We have talked about the country before in terms of the impact of low oil prices that the country relies on heavily. Also the inflation, which they've tried all sorts of ways to get it under control, and it's been quite spotty, probably at best. For Maduro himself, you think the administration, is there anything they can do now to change it, or has momentum gone so far in one direction that it's irreversible?
Well, the opportunity that not only the government, but all of Chavismo, all of the forces, the social movements that have coalesced around this Bolivarian revolution, the opportunity that they have now is to really start again from the grassroots and really give this process a rebirth. Because you have seen a situation in which many on the grassroots level have become frustrated with the Socialist Party, frustrated with bureaucracy, and what they see is an increase in corruption in the state institutions and in the military. And so it's an opportunity really for those forces to really take the reins of this process again. But it will require serious economic adjustments. It will require especially an adjustment of the exchange rate, because the real problem lies in this fixed system of exchange rate, of exchange rates that Venezuela has, which has made it very difficult for the government to adjust. Now, it didn't want to do so before the election because that would be a very unpopular move. But if the justification for waiting was to win elections, clearly that strategy hasn't worked either.
The foreign exchange restrictions that you're speaking of, I'm just curious, is the food shortages causing the restrictions, or are the restrictions causing the food shortages, which I guess in turn causes the inflation?
Essentially, the Venezuelan government has an artificially low exchange rate when it comes to the dollar. And so if you have access to official government dollars, they're very, very cheap. This creates an incentive to corruption, to speculation, to reselling those dollars on the black market, instead of using them for what they're supposed to be used for, namely to import items, including food, into the country. And that's really where the connection is. It has to do with this artificially low exchange rate.
Professor, then if that's the case, it sounds like you can't fix the inflation or the food shortages without addressing the currency issue, which is not going to be addressed so long as Maduro is there, unless he were to change his mind, or as I guess his administration changes their mind.
The hope is that now that the election is out of the way, now that there really is no excuse not to confront these things head on, hopefully those in the leadership and in the grassroots and in the social movements will realize and push for a solution to this economic problem. Because in all reality, this is a country that believes itself to be Chavista. The vast majority identify as Chavistas. And it's a situation in which the opposition didn't so much win this election as the Chavistas lost it. And so Chavismo has a good opportunity, provided they can actually solve these problems in the economy and provide a vision for moving forward and really distinguishing themselves in a more radical way from what went before them.